would like to welcome you to this quick and short webinar with our MVP, Mr. Punit. The topic for today will be continuous integration with Team Foundation Server. Let me do a quick introduction of myself. My name is, again, Victor, and I work here in Microsoft. I am the desktop guy, and what I do is I bring customers to, or I bring value to the customer by helping them understand the business value of a modern desktop. I do this kind of webinar out of the love for the IT Pro and MVP community, and I've done a couple of this in the past, and I've said to myself, I haven't done anything yet for developers. So I asked Katherine, who is the best person to kick off a webinar series for developers, and then she said, let's go get Punit. And let me tell you more about Punit. He's our MVP for C#. He's also an architect and geek. He actually works for one of our best customers here in Singapore, which is Citibank. And he has also authored a book on C programming and several other white papers. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things that I would like to tell you more about Punit, but I would leave that to him. So, Mr. Punit, I will hand the link session to you. You may go ahead and share your screen, sir.
Thanks, Victor. Hi, everyone. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so is everybody able to see my screen?
Yeah.
So thanks for joining the session. This session is going to be more about application lifecycle management using TFS. So before we start the session, I think Victor told a bit about me. So you can visit more on and know more about me from my website, www.ganshani.com, or follow me on Twitter. Below on the slide, you see some of the accolades that I have received in the past few years. So without much of delay, we'll just get on to TFS. Now, I'll assume that some of the participants on this call or this webinar are new to TFS and will give a bit of background about TFS. So as an application lifecycle management, we all deal with different set of requirements that our business gives us. And then these requirements somehow, the business requirements somehow get translated into technical code. Now, it's very easy to say it in one line that the business requirement gets translated into a technical code, but there are a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders that come in and provide their valuable inputs, and then there is a software at the end of the day that's created. Now, one of the challenges, whether it's a small scale industry or a large enterprise, that everybody faces is that these translation of requirements into the technical code. Now, what is important to understand here is that what business wants should be definitely delivered. What gets lost in this entire context of converting the business requirements into technical requirements is the actual business requirement. Now, there's a classic Dilbert that I remember that as a requirement, business requirement, you have to create a swing on which two people can sit. Somebody envisages as a desk and then creates a desk, and at the end, when it comes to software developer, he creates something else out of it. So the important need is to first understand the requirement and then convert it into code. Now that is where TFS as one of the products of Microsoft comes into picture. So till now, Team Foundation Server, for those who know, see it in 4 different places. One, they say that it's a code repository which has evolved from a legacy VSS. Second set of people see it as a product that can be used only with .NET products. So it can be bundled very well with Visual Studio, but not anything other than that. And they have this perception that it can be accessed only on Windows platform. And I've heard some of them saying, is it really for me? So we'll look into these aspects today and how we can change this perception of what TFS is and utilize it so that we have an end-to-end application lifecycle management. Now, instead of going through the deck, I would prefer to directly jump onto demos and have a lot of action happening so that it is more advantageous to everyone. So TFS, there are two versions of TFS. One of them that you're seeing on the screen is the cloud version of TFS, which means you have the TFS repository hosted somewhere in Microsoft data center. You're putting in the code inside the data center in the TFS repositories as if you're doing it in VSS. And then you are going to check in, check out, manage all your application lifecycle management inside that online TFS on the cloud. It is known as the Visual Studio Online. The product name is Visual Studio Online. But then there are customers, there are enterprises which are large, and they want to have this TFS in their own premises. So that is known as TFS on-premise. Now, functionality-wise, TFS on-premise and Visual Studio Online are just the same set of applications. But then when you go to Visual Studio Online, it has some added benefits that we'll look into later. So the best way to get started, if you don't have TFS as a server setup in your organization and you want to do something either for your hobby work or you want to suggest going to Visual Studio Online to your manager, then the best is to go to visualstudio.com and then create an account on it. So once you create an account, you get some URL like this. Okay, so this is the URL that allows you to get access to TFS, which is hosted in Microsoft Data Center. So the first thing that comes is, okay, I'm a person and I have 2 or 3 projects that I work on. So I need to first create a new project. So yeah, so I can just go ahead and say create a new project. Let's say TFS DevOps demo. Now you get process templates over here. These process templates are actually nothing but your application lifecycle management stages that you follow. So if you're following a very Visual Studio Scrum based technology, basically something like Scrum, then it's advisable that you go for Visual Studio Scrum template. If you're following an Agile methodology, Agile is the best one. If you're following Waterfall, then CMI process improvement is the best one. So I'll select Visual Studio Scrum, and then you have the flexibility of choosing the version control. So either TFS or Git, you can choose any of them and just say create project. Now this would take a bit of time to create the project on cloud, actually not much of time. And then once you have that, you'll see a dashboard for your project and it will have a repository created where you can check in your code. All you need to do is navigate to project. So if you saw, it took hardly 2 minutes. Okay. So this is your dashboard of TFS where you see your sprints. Since I chose Scrum, it will show sprints, where you can define your backlog and product catalog and everything. So I can go and say, okay, I need a product backlog item. Let's say create a data entry for bugs. Okay, and that is to be assigned to me. Fine, good enough. It's on the top priority, and I say save and close. So I can say create a book repository that takes in ISBN, author, ID, and book name. I click on save and close. So you can see there's a product backlog item created. Now you can keep on creating these backlog items, and when you go to work, now you'll see that backlog item here. Now this backlog item may have multiple sub items in it, which are part of the same sprint one. So you can click here and say, fine, let me go ahead and add a task in it. So you can keep on adding tasks. And if you have a big team, which on this demo I don't have, you can assign the tasks to them. If you don't have a team, if you're a single person working on it, you can still use TFS because it at least helps you to have the code checked in and maintain the history of the code. Now, once you have the team, all the workflow and everything set up, what happens is typically you see new, approved, committed, and done statuses of the task, which means a business analyst or a person who's closer to the business gets the requirement for you. Someone in your organization can say, okay, it is approved. So you can say, fine, let's say it is approved. And it would come up as an approved state. Then you can start working on it and you can assign the subtasks to people who are working on your project.
Hey Punit, sorry to interrupt you. I think either my screen or your screen froze because what we're looking at right now is just a mouse hovering over TFS CI and that's it.
Oh, really?
Yes, so I apologize for that. I thought it was just my screen, so I just refreshed my computer a couple of times and then I checked with Katherine and she is experiencing the same thing.
Okay, let me try it. Let me stop presenting.
Or by any chance, are you trying to share a screen that is on duplicate mode? Because that could be it. Oh, there we go. Now we can see the backlog items, and I can see your mouse moving. So good. I do apologize, but is it okay if you just
I'll go back.
Backtrack a bit?
Yeah, I'll go back. Okay, so once you create a project, what happens is that you can assign backlogs, you can create product backlogs, or you can say a feature or a task or a test case over here. And what it essentially does is, so when you click on product backlog, you can say, okay, this is an item that has to be done in. Okay, did it freeze again?
No, it's okay. So I can see right now new product backlog item and then sprint 1.
Sprint 1, not sprint 2.
Are you in sprint 2 right now?
Yes.
No, I do not see sprint 2. I only see sprint 1.
Okay. Let me try just sharing my program instead of the entire disk. That helps.
Awesome. So I can see a new product backlog item test and then big window.
So in this way, I can create a product backlog, then say, okay, this is something that needs to be done in sprint 2, and it has to be done to, let's say for me, and I can say save and close. So when I create backlogs, actually defining work for my team, and then I'll be able to see the entire status of the backlog on a single screen. So it's not just about assigning the work, but also being able to track what the status of the work is without creating multiple Excel sheets and transforming this data into anything else. Now, what also becomes interesting is that when you have these product work items, you can ask your team to write code against this requirement. So your product backlog is a set of requirements, and then your team needs to write code and then associate the code that they have written with these product backlogs and tasks associated within those backlogs. So I'll go to my another repository, which I'll use for demo because I've already written the code. So again, I go back to my original URL. Say. So I have a product called TFS CI, continuous integration, which I'll use for this demo, and in which I have my product backlog. So you can see there are product backlogs and some bugs. So I did some work and there were some bugs that were created. So if I go to the board, I see that there are 2 items that are there in the TFS CI. Now, if you notice, this testing application and create book repository is something which is specific to this TFS CI, and it is not specific to the previous project that I created. So a person can have multiple projects on which he is working, and you can see his utilization in a different way as well. So once the artifacts or once the work is defined and they are approved, people can start working on it. So similarly, what we will do is we'll open up Visual Studio and write some code. So I have some book. Now let's open up my book repository. So yeah, this is my book repository, and here I have added a place that says that get books and get all the list of books. Now I have had the numbers that saying that get book by ID. Now let me add one more method that says get book by ISBN. ISBN. It says return context. Yes, not there. ISBN. Very okay. So let's assume that there will be only one book. So we can say first or default. If it is null. So I just wrote a code which is not getting used anywhere. So you can see this is not being used anywhere. It's 0 references. Now, when I write this code, there would be some requirement against which I'm writing this code. So there is a concept of requirement traceability, and a lot of organizations believe in creating requirement traceability matrices. So for that purpose, what can happen is that if I check this code in this way, pending changes, and I see, okay, so I have some other work which is a load test. Let's say I don't want to check this in, and I will go back here, or I can actually see the pending work. So if I have and say, okay, cool, the product backlog number is, let me go in. And I said get books by ISBN. And I check in the code. Okay, so when I check in the code, what essentially happens is this piece of code goes to Visual Studio Online in this scenario, and that gets checked in against the product backlog. So this is the product backlog which all the stakeholders see. Now a developer does not necessarily need to go to this website to see the product backlogs that are assigned to him. There are ways where you can find this product backlog in the Visual Studio also. But if there's any stakeholder that wants to go and see, okay, this is the product backlog that was there, and what is the work? Is somebody working on it? Has this been prioritized? How is the status? All they can do is they can go back to history, and okay, that, let me refresh it. So this will show you the thing, and these are the child tasks. And if I go back to the tasks here, or go back from this code, let's say source control versus control on this. The history. I'll see the code that on this chain set, on this backlog, this code was checked in. Similarly, I can double click this product backlog, and then over here in history and tasks and all, we can find that there was some changes. So if you see, this was the change that comes up in the history, that okay, Punit Ganshani worked on it and he checked in some change called get books by ISBN, and it gives me complete history of what was changed in this code. So that what happens is that for a particular set of work, how much time a developer put in, what was the check-in that was done, everything can be seen on that one single dashboard. Okay, now this becomes more interesting when you go back to now to this code where people who do not have access to Visual Studio or any other IDE can also access the code and see what is the latest status or what has actually checked in the last history. So you can actually view the entire piece of code here. Okay. Go back to the controller, it will show you everything, and if there is any history associated with it, you can just go to the history and see what was changed in that, and you'll find the changes done for a period of time. So I'll go back to the deck first and then I'll take it ahead. So the reason why TFS, as perceived by people, does 4 things. When it comes to Gartner's report, it comes in the topmost corner of the Gartner report, which is the leader. So in other words, TFS actually is a complete ALM tool for any language. Now we saw some code which is written in .NET. Now you can write code in Java, you can write code in Objective-C and then still check it in TFS. You can associate builds of Java with TFS. You can associate builds of .NET with TFS. Having said that, it bundles excellent with Eclipse and Windows Explorer. You can also use TFS directly on Unix and Linux. It is accessible on all the platforms, and it's not just for a particular set of people, it's for analysts, developers, testers, business and stakeholders. So how does TFS come into this picture, and how is it able to give everything out of the box to all its stakeholders? So let's see this. So what TFS facilitates is that all the stakeholders can be a part of the planning stage in giving the requirements and creating the backlog. Now this backlog can then be transferred to the developers so that they can develop, and testers so that they can test. Once this development and test is done, it also facilitates a build and deployment onto your production services. And from there, your operations people come into picture that can take care of the production stuff. And then you can collaborate with them, or you can collaborate with the stakeholders. So it kind of allows you an entire life cycle from requirement gathering to the delivery in a continuous and in an uninterrupted mode using only one service or one platform, which is TFS. So when I say plan, what comes up is 3 things: Scrum, Waterfall, and I also call custom. I'll deal into customs a bit later. But in all these things, what remains constant is the concept of work items, where you are assigning a task to someone, or defining a product backlog, or you're handling defects that somebody raised as a bug and you're handling the life cycle of a bug, or you're giving reports and charts to your end customers. Right? So all these things can be part of the planning stage that TFS supports. Now, when I'm saying custom, it means that your organization might be following a methodology which is neither Scrum nor Waterfall. It is some iterative approach, for example. So you can define your own template wherein you can say that, okay, a particular task would require following attributes, and it can keep on iterating. It will not be going from to do to in progress to done state. It may be to do in progress, again to do in progress, or something like that, or mini sprints within each backlog. You can do all that kind of stuff as a part of planning stage. When it comes to development and test, TFS will offer you source repository where you can put C#, Java, Objective-C, any code, allow you to unit test it, use mocks, use the test scripts, have the traceability, and also add code review. And all this is possible on multiple platforms using multiple IDs. So it's not a restriction that you need to know .NET so that you're able to use TFS. And once you have done the development, the next thing that comes up is the release. So it offers an excellent support for continuous builds and continuous deployments. So in this session, what we'll focus primarily is on the continuous build. So the idea is to make you understand from planning to development to continuous builds and then deployment. Okay, So we'll get back to the demo again. So put some code over here for the ISPM, and code does not have any references. Now, for all other that is already written as a part of other requirements, that has some references, which I can see here. But this code that I've written here needs some kind of testing as well. Now, unless and until your core code or the core logic is not really unit tested, you cannot assure that any changes in the data structure, in any other component of your application changes, it will not break an existing functionality. So what you need to do is have a thoroughly unit tested code which has 100% coverage. It may not be possible always that you have 100% coverage for cases where your code is too complicated, but most of the times you can at least achieve 90-95% of coverage. So let's write some test code to ensure that we have some coverage for this method written here. So I have a method which will use this. So I can write a books test. Now, until now, the books controller is not getting any UI is not getting invoked. So if I run this program, and let me stop it again. Now I chose an MVC website so that we can test from the website perspective till the end user perspective. So this is a typical ASP.NET MVC5 website. Not much of custom code written in it.
Hi, Punit.
Yeah.
So I think what you shared is the web browser or the Visual Studio program, but not the web browser. So we're not able to see the web browser.
Oh, really? Okay, just give me a... Are you able to see this?
We're able to see the Visual Studio?
You're able to see?
Yeah, we're able to see Visual Studio. Web browser. I know you clicked on something and now it's a black screen. So I think you need to share your entire desktop for us to be able to see everything.
The only problem with entire desktop, Victor, is that it gets frozen, right?
Why don't we try it again? Let's see if that works.
A second. I'll try.
Sure thing.
Is it sharing?
I'm still waiting for it to be shown on our side. Not yet. Nothing has appeared yet.
Okay, let me try again. Sangeeta, I'll answer your question in some time.
Yeah. For all those participants, feel free to ask questions. If we are not able to address it right now, we will of course take note of it, and then we'll send it to you via email. So, Sangeeta, if it's possible, also leave your email address here so we can send you an email afterwards.
Okay, you're able to see now?
Yes, I'm able to see now. We're able to see your desktop? Good. ASP.NET MVC, we're able to see that. Great.
The typical MVC website, I've just written smallest piece of code. Oops. Okay. I'm having some database connectivity issues for my Azure thing. So my IP address got changed. I need to add it into firewall. You can see it tells me that this IP address is not allowed. So because I'm connecting from my local machine to my Azure SQL database, if I thing, I'll quickly just add it into my SQL databases as an IP that can work. So dashboard. Where's the firewall? Where's the firewall? Yeah, so it comes up here. Yeah, nice. There you go. So yeah, so now this data is getting collected from the Azure database that I've hosted. So this is a plain website where I've just added a small form where you can say, okay, John, sorry, C sharp. Okay, so we'll keep on adding it to the database, and we can query the database and get the data. Now, so what I want to do is code. So to demonstrate that we can test a website with an MVC website from the controller as if you're invoking a dynamic request to the ASP.NET MVC website that gets unit tested without actually going to the database. So we are assuming that there is some dummy repository that will get you back the data, and then will get displayed on their website. Now, at this point in time, this is a data that is coming live from the SQL database, which is hosted in Azure. But when you're unit testing, you don't want to really connect to the database to get data. So you might want to use some kind of mocking mechanisms, some fakes, Rhino mocks, mock, any kind of faking mechanism, or probably use your own IOC container that gives you a dummy repository. So for the purpose of this demo, I've created a small dummy repository. And for that reason, I'm passing an interface here. Now you can use DI engines to create an object of this interface and then send it across. I also have created one of the DI containers as an open source, so you can try that as well. But for the sake of this, I'll create a method over here. We will just ISBN data. Okay. So it's similar thing. I'll not do the null checks right now, just for the purpose of demonstration, and then we can count. You see, that method is not entered in the repository, so I need to put the same method get book by IS. That would give me the method here, and I'll say ISBN. Good enough. I send the data of book. Now, what it also requires is a view that is having the same name because it is MVC, so it requires a view which has the name of details by book. So, or alternatively, I can do a view here, but I'll just copy paste this thing so that there are no errors. That's it. So now this compiles well. Now, what I also want is, okay, good enough. So yeah, so I created that method in the interface. Now this is my dummy book repository, if you see, which will not go to the database actually, but it will just allow me to fake as if this is the repository. So I'll quickly go here and say, okay, if it is by ISBN, return of the books. Okay, fine. First or default, where x.isbn is equals to ISBN. You have some code which is returning you ISBN from dummy repository, and in the actual one it will return your data from the SQL database. Now for the unit test case, what you would want to do is write a test method here. So say, okay, I'll copy this method. And say ISBN. Now I need one ISBN from the dummy repository. I will take Thomas Earle's book. That's a very good book on service-oriented architecture. So I'll use this and say, fine, get me a book for this. Now when I run this test would execute and it should show me a success. Now, affected this, got this, because of the reason that I said. LHS and RHS were not correct, so obviously it will not pass. Okay, so now let's assume that I did some piece of code, and when I'm putting this, I did not change this, and I just did some mess up in the place where I'm getting this details by ASPN. So I'll check this code in first for the sake of understanding, and then probably break this code and see how it affects the work. So I'll again add it to 16 for the time being. Yes, and all I'll say is added get by ISBN. Perfect. Now, what should ideally happen in a end-to-end scenario where you and I don't have to touch the code is this code should be automatically tested, unit tested on the check-in, and also be deployed in somewhere, right? So I'll not check in the code, I'll show you one feature, then we'll go ahead with the check-in purpose. So there is a concept of build in TFS. Now what happens is that you can go here and you can define a new build definition. Now when you create a new build definition, okay, now this is something that I was trying to work, so this is fine. Okay, you can create your own build definition and give a dummy name or something which is like, okay, dev builds or CI builds. So this should get executed whenever any check-in has happened. So you can say, okay, it has to be a check-in continuous integration build. So whenever I check in any piece of code, it should automatically run that build and then do something. Or I can say it should be a rolling build. So every 15 minutes or 20 minutes, run a build on the server, not on local machine. So it always ensures that the code that is checked in TFS is also always getting checked in. Or I can say gated check-in. So when you're checking in the code does not get checked in unless and until it passes the build on TFS server. So if there's any code that is breaking on the server when the build is happening, it will not check in the code. So you can have that ensure that the code will never break. Whatever is there will at least compile, if not run correctly. Or you can have a setup. You can set up a schedule on weekdays working or on Saturday, Sundays to queue a nightly build, so that you get a report every day you come back to office saying that, okay, this is the last build that happened and these all test cases passed or failed. So for the purpose right now, let's say continuous integration. Fortunately, the source control is automatically picked up for you, and you have a build default. Now, if you're using a Visual Studio Online, you'll have this hosted build controller. But if you're using TFS on premise, you'll have to download the TFS for server and then create the build controller and the build agents at your end. So since we're using Visual Studio Online, we have hosted build controller. So we're relying on Microsoft infrastructure to build this. And then you can say what you want to build. So I have only one application, ci.web.solution. So I'm going to build this enough. And then you can say, okay, build it with debug or fine, debug is good enough. And platform is any CPU. So you define the platform. It has to be x64 ARM processor, x86. Usually I prefer any CPU. And then you can say do an automated test. So anything that DLL that ends with test.dll in that directory where it is getting built, all the tests in that DLL will be gone through when the build happens, and if there is any test that fails, the build will fail. So that is one reason when I go back to my work on TFS CI, you can see a lot of build failures here. Are you able to see the screen? It flickered a while, so I think it would have gone.
We're able to see the screen. Right now we're looking at Visual Studio TFS CI web browser.
Okay, excellent. So if you see, these are the build failures, deliberate build failures that I've created, so that you can see that when any any test fails or any configuration or anything fails, you'll see something that comes up in that as a build failure, and then you can work on it. So you can define all those settings here to say, okay, do I need to find out the test? Do I need to say that these work items or these product backlogs were delivered as a part of this build? Do you want to create any work item and assign it to a person when any build fails? All those kind of things you can actually configure here in Visual Studio and then just save it. So when you do all these kind of things, what happens is this build definition is getting saved on the TFS server. And when any code check-in happens, TFS detects that what are the builds, is there any continuous build enabled for this? It says yes, there is. So it goes ahead and builds the code and finds and tells you the status. Now, I have two builds defined here. In fact, three. This is manual. If you see, it has a down arrow which says that it is a manual ci.web. This is CITFS underscore CD. It's a continuous delivery, and this is CITFS underscore CD2, which is also continuous delivery. Now this one failed and this one passed for the last check-in that I did in this demo. Now there is a reason why it failed. There is a configuration wrongly done in CITFS underscore CD. So your build can not just fail because of your code, but can also fail if the configuration of the build is incorrect. So let's check in this code and see what happens when we check in, right? So pending work items, added ISBN, or rather let's do one thing. Let's click the build that's successfully completed and see what happens there first. So I double click on this. So this is a bar chart that tells me how many builds passed, how many failed, and how much time did every build take. And when I go down here, it will show me that this is the solution that compiled. This is the log file. So there were no errors, no warnings. So it's a beautiful code. And you see that there are 1 test runs, 7 out of 7 tests passed. So, okay, so you can see 7 out of 7 tests passed, and then you can see associated change sets. So the last build, when last check-in before in this demo that I did, get books by ISBN, was associated change set 24. That is the change set got built in this one, and there's a work item product backlog 16 that was created, that was actually impacted because of this build. Okay, so I can just go ahead and now check in and see what happens in this build. It's checking in 6 hours. Okay, let's here and say builds. So if you see here, there are 2 builds that get queued on the TFS server. Now, if you're using Visual Studio Online, you get some build minutes free from Microsoft. So if you're using only number of build minutes, then you're not getting charged more for that. So hopefully that information will appear here. Oops. Okay, let's go to build. So for people who don't have Visual Studio or Eclipse or any other IDE for which TFS has an integration, they can always go on the website, the TFS website, and then can view the builds, the work, the code, everything. So actually whatever you can do in Visual Studio, you can actually do it on website, except for writing code. So I think that's also something will be soon a feature. So there are a lot of websites that allow you to write single page code or anything, and then you can actually put it in TFS. So you can see 2 builds are queued up, and it will take some while for them to. So this is already in running mode, and this is the one that I'm expecting to pass. So Let's wait for a minute for it to complete. Okay. Good enough. Let show me quickly. Okay, so it has successfully built it. On the targets. So same thing I can be over here as well. Let's stop this one because I don't need two builds to get continued for this demo. Okay, till the time this build happens, I'll show you something else as well. So now this build is progressing. Now you can actually set up some of the settings here in the process template manager, where you have different methodologies like Agile, Scrum. You can set up here, or you can also set up project settings. What is that? Yeah, product settings. Let's go here. No, not here. Correct. So one of the things that I personally enforce everybody whenever I have my talks is that you should always have a check-in policy that ensures that whatever gets checked in into a code is always having a requirement associated with it. So when I'm checking a code over here, when I go for pending work items, pending changes, I get this related work item. But this is not really mandatory at this moment. You can skip this and still write some comment and then check in the code, which works fine. But this is not something that should be done in an enterprise environment. So what you should do is you should go to source control as a project administrator or a TFS administrator, set up a check-in policy that it needs work items. So anytime anybody checks it in, there has to be a requirement associated with it so that you have 100% traceability. So you can add in work item and say, okay, requires associated work item. Similarly, you can also have a check-in policy for build. So when you have this, that it should say that, okay, you can only check in if the last build was successful. So if some build is broken, you will not be able to put in code unless until that is fixed, which means that somebody who broke the build has to first fix it, and then only somebody else can check in the code. And once this checked in code is fixed and it builds perfectly.
Oh, hi, Punit. Sorry to interrupt you again. I think the screen just froze again. Mohit just noticed that.
Okay, where did it stop?
What we're looking at right now is you clicking on Process Template Manager.
Oh, really? Okay, this is that thing. Trying again.
And thank you, Mohit, for noticing that. I was looking at the screen. I was sort of distracted.
So you can click on source control. I'll keep it short this time.
Good. So we can see your mouse moving to source control. We see a pop-up window coming up. Good.
And then you can define check-in policies where you can say that people should not be able to check in the code without a work item, or they can only check in if the previous build has been successful. So all these things you can configure as a TFS admin, which is a one-time activity, and then your team knowingly or unknowingly follows the principles that you have defined as check-in policies in TFS. So you can ensure 100% traceability and good code quality as well. So you see that this build got successfully completed, and if I again go back to the build and double click this, now it will show me the same thing. But what I also want to show you is that to read this line, your website was deployed to ctfs.azurewebsites.net. So it is continuous integration tfs.azurewebsites.net. So this is known as continuous delivery. So if you are actually using Azure as a platform to give your code or to deliver clients, what you can do is you can go to manage.azure, create a website. So define the URL that you want on the Azure portal, that's a cloud portal. So what I did is I created a website called CITFS. So it's integration TFS. And what you can do is you can connect to your Visual Studio Online. So when you click on Connect Visual Studio Online, what you actually see is you'll actually write your URL, which was like punit.ganshani.visualstudio.com, similar URL, and then whatever code you write automatically can get deployed in Azure. So in a word, in one sentence, if you were to sum up, you are writing a code which gets unit tested immediately, which is a continuous integration, and then gets directly deployed to the website. Now, for the purpose of demonstration, let's quickly, did I stop it? I think I stopped this. Let me go and start up the website. Yeah, it stopped. So I'm starting the website. Good enough. Okay, so you can see the website on Azure. Just for demonstration purpose, as one of my last demos, but I'll just go ahead and show you that it works actually. TFS. Just do a small change in the UI, so you can see ASP.NET MVC, and I just put this change in again. Okay, let me try change the text. That's it. Really vague answer, and this I click on check-in. Say okay, fine, good, go ahead, and it fails. So it tells me that I need a reason and I need a work item where I can put it. So okay, now I provide the work item. The admin has become strict on me, and I do a check-in. So what essentially it's going to do, again trigger a build, and that essentially will trigger a deployment which will directly deploy this code into cloud. Now if you're using TFS on cloud, which is Visual Studio Online, you can still have this kind of functionality, which is offered by a product called InRelease, which Microsoft procured some time ago. They acquired a company, which will allow you to do these continuous deployments in an on-premise environment. So you can still have your production environment, and it will be definitely stable because you are ensuring that your code is getting checked in, tested, unit tested, and then deployed directly to the required environment without any manual interpretation or any manual person coming into picture and doing it for you, running any scripts on the server without remote access and anything. So this internally ensures that you have a complete application lifecycle management from the time of requirement to development to testing and directly into delivery. Now, one of the aspects which I would want to cover, but I think I'm running out of time, is also load testing. Now, many times we need our websites, especially those that are consumer-based products, we need websites to be running up and running, and we want to see how much load they can actually take when there are 10 users, 1,000 users, concurrent, when there is a ramp up in the user base, and all those kind of things. So in a nutshell, I'll just go through a wizard and then conclude here. So I can create a load test which can run on cloud, and I can say that, okay, I need a normal distribution of load with say 1,000 users, okay, or you can say step users. So take a count of 10, every 10 seconds increase by 10 and reach up to maximum 2,000, 200, fine, good enough. How do you want the test to run? In the what is the mixed model that you want to run based on virtual users or sequential test orders? You can define here. Then you can say fine, what are the test unit that you want to run? So you can create a unit test that, okay, I want to have the website to be tested. I said good enough, and it is 100% distribution, or you can say website and something else, contact page as well. Good enough, you can add it. Where it not come? Okay, so anyways, you can add something like that, and then you can define that, okay, some people will be connected from LAN, some will be from 3G, and all those kind of stuff. And then you can say add some computer parameters or anything you can add, and then say finish. And you can run this test. You can actually see how will your website react when there's a step increase in the load. And you can run this all on the on cloud as well, so that you can see how Azure is also performing to your needs. So from a point of view where you are writing requirements and gathering requirements in an Excel sheet, writing code in some version control, any version control, not TFS, and then delivering by scripts or any Unix scripts, DOS scripts, PowerShell scripts, you can actually have a seamless integration using TFS for requirement gathering, development, delivery, and then testing as load testing as well. So that's the place where TFS offers its unique for giving a very good dashboard. See different kind of dashboards for the burn down, for the pending items, what are the effort that has been put by team. You can view the product backlogs, or you can see what is the task that is assigned to me, how many iterations I'm working on, all those kind of stuff. Or you can develop something, unit test, and also have code reviews. So all this thing is bundled up in one place, which is TFS, and it gives you a complete ALM experience. The last step, I think the deployment would have been completed by now. Just refresh it. So here you go. So we added TFS demo, and we just did a check-in, which ensured that it got integrated and deployed. I'll conclude my session with that. And let's see if there are any questions.
Punit, so there's one question from Sangeeta, which is there any correlation between the Visual Studio Developer license on the Professional and Ultimate and features? I think it's more like Windows 8 Professional and Windows 8 Enterprise. There's just difference in features. You get more in Enterprise, but how is it different for Team Foundation Server?
Okay, so see, if you're having an ultimate version of Visual Studio is actually an IDE, right? So it has limited things to do with TFS. See, the best thing that TFS offers is that it clubs very well with Visual Studio, but doesn't restrict yourself to Visual Studio. So all the features that are available on TFS are not necessarily available because of Visual Studio, right? So whether you're using a professional or ultimate, the features of TFS will remain the same. When you are using different versions of TFS, obviously there are differences. And if you're using TFS on premise, you have to do a lot of things on your own, which if you leave it on Visual Studio Online, you will not have to do it. But there is no difference as such if you're using a professional version or an ultimate version for a TFS related stuff. Does that answer your question? Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, is there any other question that you'd like to ask our MVP Punit? Punit, will you be able to share us your email address where we can contact you if we have any additional questions?
Definitely, I'll just type in here itself.
Right.
This is my email address, and this is my website where you can reach out and read TFS items. I have written many items, many articles on TFS. So if you want to build up your own TFS server, have build configurations done on it, you can just visit my website. It has end-to-end guide. If you're facing any issues with it or want to integrate TFS with some other version control, even that is possible. So all those kind of permutation combinations that are possible with TFS on premise. So a lot of articles on that. So feel free to drop me an email if there are any questions that are unanswered or you realize it later. No problems. I'll get back to you soon.
Right, perfect. And I'm also sharing my email address and my name here. If you would like to know more about Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Office 2013, and Yammer, I'm the guy to go to. And if you are an MVP and you would like to have a webinar like this hosted by Microsoft, just do let me know and I'll be happy to do that for you. Okay, Punit, parting words, sir. Any last words that you'd like to mention to our audience?
It's actually an evening now, so it's time to chill, go through the notes that I'll share probably soon, and then get started with TFS.
Yeah, perfect, great. So again, thank you very much to everyone who have joined us in this call for the last hour. We do apologize if there was any technical issues that we've encountered. We're going to try to make that better in the next few webinars that I will be hosting. I will be keeping in touch with all of you. I will share the calendar of events as soon as I can get confirmation from the other MVPs. So do expect more sessions like this. And again, you have the email address on the screen. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send us an email. So having said that, I'll be ending the recording and I'll be ending this call. Thank you very much for everyone who joined the call.